If you're anything like me, then you've probably enjoyed a lot of the Italian American crime shows and movies growing up. When I started playing Fallout games, I noticed the general theme of almost all of the games having this organized crime aspect,
Hey,
having one, if
Americans
not
are about to
multiple
carry guns into
families,
Gomorrah.
and having
Secure
pre
weapons with
war
me.
and post war history inside of the lore.
You'll
I'm
get
honestly
respect
not
around here.
surprised that the Italian American Mafia or La Costa Nostra aspect of crime specifically pops up inside of
Hello and
Fallout so
welcome to Gomorrah.
frequently,
What can I help
since
you
the
with
shows and
today?
movies that I mentioned earlier were extremely popular. So I think it makes perfect sense that the
Sorry,
developers of
we
these
don't have
games
any
would take
hookers
inspiration
available right
from
now,
this to
but
fuel
feel free
the
to drop
shadier
in and
side of the
have a talk
wasteland.
to our other
There are a
services.
bunch of different crime groups in the Fallout series that fit this kind of stereotype to more or
They
less of an
sure do,
extent.
but
But in this
loosely.
video, I'm going to be talking
Same
about certain
chips.
groups in three games specifically: Fallout 2, Fallout
Follow?
New Vegas, and Fallout 4. I'm going to start by talking about Fallout 2,
I knew
since
someone
it's not
might
only the
want more.
first game chronologically,
What do you want to
but
know?
organized crime has the largest place inside of the story there. So, let's
All I
go
can
back
tell
in
you is
time to
Father Jim.
1998
He's
and
the
talk
lowest
about the
level
city of
lieutenant
vice
wanna
and
be able to
crime,
talk to.
New Reno.
Some of the girls say he's gonna.
So, like I mentioned, most, if not all, the aspects of this category of organized crime take place inside the city of New Reno. Reno, as a city, has some really large ties to the American Mafia, both in real life and inside of the Fallout universe. Combined with this, the city of Reno itself took very little structural damage during the Great War, so it became a perfect environment for these kinds of crime groups to operate in. Unlike New Vegas, however, Reno doesn't have a centralized government, or at least at this point in the story, influence from the NCR to be able to control crime. This new city that grew out of nuclear fire, aptly named New Reno, is instead run by four different crime families: the Bishops, the Wrights, the Salvatores, and the Mordinos. This balance of power inside the game is delicate and only lasts for a limited amount of time. No matter what ending of Fallout 2 the player's actions influence, Reno changes dramatically after the events of the Enclave. Whether being absorbed by the NCR, having New Reno changed into a civilized city, having the entire city run by one single crime family, or just dying out altogether. The four different crime families, as we find them in Fallout 2, have different methods with the same ulterior motive: to run New Reno, under their banner. I'm not going to talk too much in detail about each of these crime families, because I feel the differences of the four crime families and their methods of taking control of New Reno and their eventual outcomes deserves its own video dedicated to it. But for context, I'll go ahead and describe each of the four families and what makes them unique. Starting with the Mordinos are more closely related to a drug cartel than they are a traditional crime family. Aside from owning the Desperado Casino, they are directly responsible for the creation and distribution of Jet and Fallout 2. Drugs are their weapon, and the high addiction rate of Jet, combined with their sole distribution rights, the Mordinos set to control the population of New Reno, Redding, and the greater areas around Nevada and New California. Next, the Bishops, who own the Shark Club Casino, have the ambitions to end the anarchy in New Reno through political motivation. Their leader, John Bishop, isn't a good person, but is aiming to use the NCR congressional system to his advantage to eventually have the NCR annex the city and have both prostitution and gambling legalized. Having a lot of spies outside of the city itself, John Bishop is arguably more concerned with the politics on the outside rather than the city of New Reno. Next, the Salvatore crime family has a unique reputation inside of New Reno. They were on the wrong end of a few battles, and now they tend to stay quiet to themselves. Word on the city, however, is that they're packing some impressive firepower in the form of laser pistols, which they call Lightbringers. The Salvatores are extremely twitchy about their reputation and tend to kill anybody who asks questions about this kind of weaponry. The Chosen One can eventually find where the Salvatores are getting the laser weapons from, as well as their overall plan to build up their forces for something big. Finally, the Wrights are considered to be the weakest family in New Reno when we find them. But so far they have survived and thrived against all odds inside of the Wasteland, and are still one of the major players inside of New Reno. Furthermore, the Wrights are the only family in New Reno that's actually a family, with most of their group being related to each other. Instead of running a casino like other families, the Wrights mainly focus on small-time gun running and alcohol production, instead of slaves and chems like the other families focus on. They also have some huge ideas that the Chosen One can help them with. The Chosen One can choose to ally themselves with any one of the four families to, for lack of a better term, swing the power in their direction. These four families operate in a similar structure, but have different methods for ultimately obtaining their goal of controlling the city, whether passively or actively. Whichever family is chosen, the player can work their way up, and once completing one family's chain of quests, the Chosen One has the option to receive the Made Man perk, which has a few benefits exclusive to New Reno. While receiving more popularity in New Reno and having access to some new services, some of which I can't even mention in this video, this perk actually has two drawbacks. One being that the other three crime families will hate you, as well as, in New Reno, drug dealers and bartenders will charge more for their services. Being a made man does have some benefits, but unfortunately, it's only really effective in the city of New Reno and doesn't expand to other areas of the wasteland. Therefore, as of now, this is the closest thing inside of the Fallout series that the player can get to operating in a Mafia-style organized crime family. With that being said, though, there are two other games that have organized crime aspects inside of their own stories. So let's move forward a little bit to discuss what's in Fallout New Vegas. So, the city of New Vegas is similar to New Reno. They have multiple families that each control their own casino. One of the main differences between these families and the one in New Reno is the control of Mr. House. Mr. House has his political control and influence all across the Strip. Instead of these families developing naturally, Mr. House, in his bid to make the Strip fortified enough to resist a major assault by the NCR, went into contracts with 3 tribes and turned them into the families that we know today. Out of these 3, I'm only going to be talking about 2 that I feel really fits the Mafia stereotype, and that's the Omerta family that run the Gomorrah Casino, and the Chairmen who run the Tops. Starting with the Chairmen, there is a very important person that I need to bring up first and foremost, and they're the whole reason why the main story of Fallout New Vegas exists. Benny. I don't want to bring up the Chairmen too much, because they're more groovy casino owners than actual gangsters, at least from what I can find lore-wise. Benny, on the other hand, is a completely different story. Benny, who has very catchy nicknames such as Fancy Pants or the Man in the Checkered Suit, is actually based off a real-life mobster with the reputation of building Las Vegas, named Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy Siegel was well known for wearing the same signature black and white checkered suit that Benny wears in Fallout New Vegas. Similar to Bugsy, Benny is a very ambitious person with plans to take over the Strip. Bugsy poured a lot of money into Las Vegas in the mid-1940s, such as financing the construction of the Flamingo Hotel. Bugsy believed very heavily in the build it and they will come mindset, with the Flamingos supplying the gambling, the best food and liquor, and the best entertainment at a reasonable price. This, in turn, attracted not only celebrities, but high-roller gamblers that often spend $50 or $100 per hand, which is today's equivalent of spending roughly $750 or $1,500 per hand. While the Tops Casino itself, regarding the architecture, is based off other casinos in Las Vegas, after doing a little more research, I would like to assume that the developers in New Vegas based the Tops' day-to-day operation heavily on Bugsy Siegel's operation of the Flamingo. The Tops has this reputation on the Strip with having the best food outside of the Ultra Lux's gourmet restaurant that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, while having excellent entertainment and gambling. The Tops has this feeling of being a mob-run casino with Benny at its head, but I feel that the Chairmen lack something that our other group, the Omertas, have in terms of actually being a mob family. Why do I say that the Omerta family in particular fits this bill compared to the Chairmen? Well, there's 2 reasons. The first is their casino, Gomorrah, is directly influenced by a real-life casino in Las Vegas called the Dunes Hotel and Casino. The Dunes actually had real-world connections to the Mafia, even employing Tony the Ant Spilatro in the 1970s. If this name seems familiar to you, it may be because in the movie Casino, Nicky Santoro, played by Joe Pesci, is directly based on Tony Spilatro. Pretty cool, right? Moving on though, the second reason why I think this family fits the Mafia stereotype is because of a piece of dialogue from Mr. House. When we asked Mr. House about the Omerta family during our quest with them, Mr. House has this to say.
Yes, though at the time they called themselves the Slitherkin, a vicious clan, not that that's changed exactly. They were nomads, capable fighters, but their specialty was betrayal. They'd invite travelers into their yurts, drug them, murder, or enslave them. They took pride in their craft. I don't think Omertas saw other people as people at all. Everyone else was just prey. They reminded me of a certain criminal element Vegas used to attract. I told them some stories, gave them some clothes, and they ran with it.
By a certain criminal aspect, I'm almost 100% sure he's referencing the Mafia. Similar to the families in New Reno, the Omertas have their own plans to rule the city that they find themselves in. We can find out that the Omertas are collecting both firearms and chemical weapons in the quest How Little We Know, where the courier can help the bosses of the family plan for their attack on the Strip, or help Cachino, a lower-level lieutenant, shut down the whole operation and place him in power. Either way we decide to solve this, unlike with Fallout 2, we do not become a made member of the Omerta crew. We aren't even allowed to carry weapons openly inside of the casino. We're just given some money and a pat on the back, and that's mostly the extent of the organized crime aspect in Fallout New Vegas. Moving on to the final game I'll be discussing for this video, Fallout 4's organized crime aspects are mainly focused on one single group called the Triggermen. The sole survivor will most likely first come across the Triggermen in the mission Unlikely Valentine, where they will need to fight through an entire subway station and vault full of these Triggermen in order to save our favorite synth detective, Nick Valentine. While the Triggermen are the least interactive in the Fallout series, they're definitely the most stereotypical in terms of the weapons and equipment they use. Favoring style over practicality, the Triggermen wear either shirts and slacks or suits with ties. They also carry the iconic submachine gun, which is based on the real-life Thompson submachine gun. The Triggermen mainly operate on an income of chem dealing, gambling, as well as some extortion. The Triggermen's main base of operations seem to be Good Neighbor, where one of their bosses, Murawski, has an office in the Hotel Rexford. However, the Triggermen can be found in multiple places throughout the Commonwealth, including Easy City Downs, the Four-Leaf Fish Packing Plant, as well as guarding Good Neighbor. One interesting thing about Triggermen is that they have a lot of ghouls inside of their ranks, with some of them even admitting to working in organized crime settings pre-war. Speaking of ghouls that worked in organized crime settings pre-war, we can meet a pre-war mob boss in Fallout 4 named Eddie Winter in the quest Long Time Coming. Eddie Winter was a notorious leader of an Irish-American crime family inside of Boston pre-war. To ensure that he would survive nuclear devastation, he built a bunker and became one of the very first ghouls. There's not much information on the crew that Eddie Winter ran pre-war, but there are mentions of a few assassinations and robberies, as well as suspected to be behind the murder of the real Nick Valentine's fiancée. His plan was to rise again in a new world to restart his life of organized crime, but in the quest Long Time Coming with Nick Valentine, the sole survivor can ensure that this never happens. Eddie Winter and some of the other crime aspects in the Fallout series definitely deserve spotlight, but that'll be for another time. Overall, I think that the Fallout series has a few references to organized crime, but not much gameplay. I would imagine this changing if a future Fallout game took place in one of the OC hotspots, such as Chicago or New York. I want to thank you guys for watching this short Fallout lore video. Out of curiosity, have any of you guys become a made man inside of Fallout 2? If so, could you tell me which family you chose in the comments below? Other than that, thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.